Welcome to today's critique, where we're looking at a deeply haunting clinical case study of Hermione navigating severe psychological trauma, magical dissociation, and mental imprisonment in a dystopian reality.
Yeah, it's an incredibly intense piece of work.
It really is. And we're going to dive right into the feedback, starting with her internal state. So the portrayal of the magical fugue state effectively illustrates a mind fracturing under extreme duress. Yet there is an opportunity to deepen the physiological manifestations of this defense mechanism, to make it feel more intensely personal rather than purely clinical.
Right, because right now, the ambition is definitely there, but the execution struggles just a bit, mostly with its reliance on those external diagnostic explanations.
Like with Healer Stroud.
Exactly. You have Healer Stroud and the mind healers using these literal magical projections, like the glowing purple and golden orbs floating in the air, to explain the calcification of her magical layers.
Yeah, which are hiding the memories. Let's look closely at the section discussing the mind healer's evaluation. It's fascinating, but does the clinical detachment inadvertently shield the reader from the horror of the dissociation itself?
I think it absolutely does. It establishes this cold criminal psychology tone, which is cool, but it tells the reader about the trauma instead of grounding us in the sensory reality of it.
Right, it's like we're looking at a medical chart.
Yeah, so the weakness here is that externalization. When you use a visual like an orb to represent trauma, you bypass what she's actually feeling.
So the suggestion would be to integrate more visceral, sensory-based symptoms of the fugue state directly into her immediate point of view, right? Like before and during those clinical diagnoses.
Exactly. The text needs to emphasize the haunting emptiness of the dissociation. Think about it like a corrupted hard drive.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right? The data is there, it's slowing the system down, but you can't access it. We need to feel her reaching for a thought and just hitting a cold, calcified wall.
Yeah, hitting that wall. For a concrete example, instead of just hearing the healer explain the surgical precision of the memory blocks, the author could show her experiencing phantom sensory echoes.
Like what, specifically?
Like, maybe she smells the sharp ozone of a specific curse when they skirt a blocked memory. Or she feels the phantom weight of that sensory deprivation cell pressing down on her.
Oh, wow. Yeah, even if she can't see the memory, her body remembers it.
Exactly. The physical nausea, or just a sudden terrifying blankness when she tries to recall how she survived those 16 months in the dark.
Because she spent hours in that cell doing physical exercises just to stop the memories, right?
Yeah, just pushing her body to exhaustion. So we should feel the claustrophobia of her own mind locking her out. She shouldn't just be a passive observer of her own brain scan.
Right. Making it deeply personal changes it from a medical curiosity into a lived nightmare.
It really does. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about the High Reeve. The psychological weight of his mental intrusions creates a compelling foundation for a Panopticon effect, but the narrative occasionally loses the chronic, suffocating paranoia this dynamic should generate in everyday moments.
Yeah, the Panopticon effect is so crucial here.
Which, just for context, is that prison design where inmates never know if they're being watched, so they have to constantly police themselves.
Right, it's the ultimate psychological subjugation. But the weakness in this draft is that the legitimacy is almost entirely depicted as acute, excruciating events.
Like Voldemort tearing her mind like paper?
Or Malfoy meticulously sorting through her memories during their scheduled, encounters. But the true horror of a Panopticon isn't just the moment you're inspected. It's the constant internalized belief that you are always being watched.
But wait, as I understand it from the notes, the argument here is that the physical cuffs already drain her magic, neutralizing her physically. If she's physically neutralized, how does the mental Panopticon function differently?
Is there a risk that focusing solely on the physical restrictions might overlook the psychological self-censorship?
Oh, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, because the cuffs take away her physical agency, right? But the mind is a person's absolute final refuge. When you lose your body, you retreat inward.
And if that inward space is compromised,
then you have nothing. It changes from a fear of physical punishment to a fear of total psychological erasure. The narrative sometimes lets the physical trauma overshadow that quiet dread.
So the suggestion is to heighten the psychological dread by embedding that chronic fear of mental surveillance into her quietest, most solitary moments?
Exactly. Show how the trauma forces her to police her own thoughts. make her mind feel like an unsafe, monitored prison, even when Malfoy is miles away.
Okay, let's give the listeners some concrete examples of how to do that. What if, when she's alone folding paper origami?
The little cranes, yeah.
Right, that soothes. Or doing mental arithmancy, just to stay grounded. The author could describe her actively suppressing her own organic thoughts in those moments.
Yeah. Terrified that a stray memory of Ron or Harry might pop up.
Exactly. Because if she enjoys a memory of them, it leaves a mental footprint for Malfoy to find later.
Which means her own idle daydreams could literally get her friends killed.
That is so dark, but so effective. And what about her habit of reciting potion recipes?
Right, the clinical potion recipes. Currently, she does that to stop panic attacks.
But what if it was framed as a deliberate smokescreen?
Oh, I like that. Like she's building a fake room in her mind.
Yeah, a fake room made entirely out of mundane potion ingredients to hide her true emotional state.
That's brilliant, because it takes the Panopticon out of the torture chamber and puts it into, like, a random Tuesday afternoon. She becomes her own jailer.
Exactly. The self-censorship becomes this invisible, chronic torture running beneath every single scene.
Right. But then, of course, there's the issue of what happens when that self-censorship fails.
Which brings us to our final major point. Treating the recovery of memories as a secondary trauma is a profound narrative choice. Though the transition between the anesthetic numbness of memory loss and the agony of remembrance could be more heavily contrasted to maximize the emotional devastation.
Yeah. The way memory functions here is basically the main thematic pillar of the piece.
It really is. But the weakness is an issue of, like, baseline contrast. Because her baseline state is already one of profound physical and emotional suffering.
Endless suffering, really.
Right. The specific, unique psychological agony of regaining her memories kind of blends into the background of her overarching misery.
It just feels like one more bad thing happening to her.
Exactly. The narrative doesn't fully exploit the tragic irony here. Healing her mind is actually more destructive to her psyche than the traumatic event that broke it.
That makes sense, but could the evidence also support a different conclusion? Like the idea that her memory recovery is actually a form of self-destruction rather than healing?
Oh wait, say more about that.
Well, if we view the memory recovery not as a flawed healing process, but as an active destruction of her only defense mechanism, the tragedy multiplies.
Because the fugue state is the only thing keeping her sane.
Right. The brain sealed those doors for a reason. Opening them is like unleashing a pathogen.
Okay, so the suggestion for the author is to sharpen that contrast by really emphasizing the dark, hollow safety of her amnesia. Portray the fugue state not just as a loss, but as a merciful anesthetic.
Yeah, a total anesthetic. And when the memories do return, frame it as a brutal, bleeding breach of a healed wound.
Treating the recovered memories as a fatal poison returning to her bloodstream.
Exactly. We need concrete examples of this in the text.
Okay, so when Voldemort or Lucius shatters those mental blocks, we need an explicit contrast, like take the memory of Colin Creedy's excoriation.
Oh, that scene is brutal.
It is. Right now, it reads as a horrifying flashback, but the author should highlight how, before she remembered it, she simply felt empty.
Like hollow but safe.
Right, but upon remembering the visual of his flesh being stripped away, the grief hits her with such physical force that she actively wishes to be back in the sensory deprivation cell.
Wow. Proving that the violence of remembering is far worse than the torture of forgetting.
Exactly. It completely subverts the usual amnesia trope, where getting memories back is a triumph. Here, it's a violation.
It's lethal. She should be begging her own mind not to remember.
Yeah, the prose itself could even reflect that, like precise and emotionally flat during the fugue state, but breathless and chaotic when a memory breaches.
That contrast in the writing style would make the reader feel the exact moment the poison hits her system.
Absolutely. It takes it from a clinical study to just an inescapable emotional experience.
For sure. Well, to recap the main points of this critique, the submitted material sets up a deeply haunting exploration of trauma. To elevate the psychological depth, we suggest first, internalizing the sensory experience of the fugue state rather than relying solely on medical exposition.
Right. Make us feel the calcified walls in her mind.
Exactly. Second, amplify the persistent dread of the Panopticon effect during quiet moments of self-censorship, so her own mind feels like a monitored prison.
Building those fake rooms out of potion recipes. Yes. And finally, starkly contrast the merciful numbness of amnesia against the devastating violence of remembrance. These actionable shifts will really solidify this as a masterpiece of criminal and psychological fiction. We eagerly invite the author to submit their revised work back in again for more feedback.